Hello, everyone. My name is Ruth Mukwana, and I am the Helen Hamlin Senior Fellow and Director of Humanitarian Studies at Fordham's Institute of International Humanitarian Affairs. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our second webinar in the series focusing on the future of humanitarian aid. Last week, we had our first speaker in this series, Mr. Chris Lockyer, former Secretary General of Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, and I hope some of you were able to join him and to join us last week. Today's speaker is Mr. Sudhanshu S. Singh. The Institute of International Humanitarian Affairs was founded 25 years ago to prepare current and future aid workers with the knowledge and skills needed to respond effectively in times of humanitarian crisis and disaster. We achieve this through webinars, conferences, seminars, publications, research, and exhibitions. But we also have our academic programs, a bachelor's in humanitarian studies, and 2 graduate programs. The Institute is always very eager to collaborate with other academic and humanitarian partners, both here in the USA and throughout the world, and has done so throughout its history. Before introducing today's guest, I'd like to talk about the next webinar in this series. Our next guest will be Mr. Juan Javes Gonzalez, a lead advisor for crisis risk financing at the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and advisor on the future to the Emergency Relief Coordinator. He moderates OCHA's listening channel, a place to imagine what humanitarian action should look like by 2035. And next week, he will be sharing some of these trends with us that are emerging from these conversations. This will be next week on Wednesday at 12 p.m. New York time. And now for today, I am really thrilled to introduce our speaker, Mr. Sudhanshu S. Singh, an Indian humanitarian and development professional with over 37 years of global experience. He is the founder and CEO of Humanitarian Aid International, an Indian civil society organization working primarily in India, but also seeking South-South and triangular cooperation. Until 2015, he was based in Geneva, where he was engaged in key global processes. He has managed responses to major disasters across the Asia-Pacific region. As CEO of Humanitarian Aid International, Mr. Singh continues to engage in key global processes such as the Grand Bargain, Charter for Change, World Humanitarian Action Forum, and Pledge for Change. He is a Grand Bargain Sherpa representing the local platform established by Humanitarian Aid International. He is one of the founders and currently Secretary General of the Alliance for Empowering Partnerships and an ExCom member of ADRRN. Mr. Singh has also authored numerous papers published nationally and globally, and he is a very strong advocate of re-localization and decolonization of the aid architecture. And this is what he is going to be talking to us about. Mr. Singh, again, it's my pleasure to introduce you, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth and Lily, for inviting me to talk on this topic, which is very close to my heart. Localization has become a global talking point since World Humanitarian Summit was held in 2016 in Turkey, which led to Grand Bargain. And almost at the same time, Charter for Change also emerged. So these two frameworks became a starting point for localization. And then decolonization got added when the global movement on Black Lives Matter started. I'm very pleased to be here today because supposedly I'm talking to students on a topic, and the topic is the future of humanitarian aid. And if we have to talk about, we have to be optimistic about the future of humanitarian aid, then of course we have to be very, very optimistic with the future workforce, which is going to join humanitarian sector in the coming years. And of course, it's the students who are going to join this workforce, where my hopes lie. Um, I have gone through the syllabus of IAHA also, uh, very, very rich syllabus, which is training the students on different components of humanitarianism, coordination mechanism, innovation, etc. But it also offers opportunities to students to do internship with UN agencies, INGOs, diplomatic missions, global think tanks, etc. And that means when you graduate from your university, you'll have a very attractive degree and a rich experience of internship with reputed NGOs, reputed international agencies, bilateral or multilateral. But here, I would request you to take a pause and think about two questions. One, humanitarian sectors have been trying to solve. And who is trying to solve? Who is creating problems and who is trying to solve those problems? Can you see the similarities? Often those who have problems have not created them, and those who have usually caused problems are also trying to solve the problems. Here, Albert Einstein said, the same mental framework which created problems cannot solve the problems. The same set of mindset which created the problems cannot solve them. But here we see the overlap. And second question, which I would like you to think about. There are two categories of workers in our sector. One, who are graduating from very reputed universities like Fordham, who get internship with UN agencies, INGOs, diplomatic missions, etc. And the second, the frontline workers who are working with grassroots organizations rooted in indigenous communities, villages, etc., etc. These two categories of workers. Now think about whose knowledge counts, who has more aura around himself or herself. If these two categories of worker meet, who will dictate, who will be talking, and who will be listening? And you know the answer is very obvious. And this is what I call knowledge colonization, a new kind of hierarchy in the knowledge production system where uh, those who are graduated, educated in a certain kind of epistemology, they automatically acquire the top position in the knowledge hierarchy. And those who are educated in vernacular are not educated at all, who are rooted in the communities, uh, they come at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now, before we come to discuss localization and decolonization, we have to also reflect a bit about globalization and colonization. And if I just take very recent history of the USA, there was money making at industrial scale from 1860s to 1920s, 30s. And then in the US, philanthropy-based foundations emerged. And if I could just cite a few foundations, Rockefeller Foundation started in 1913, Ford Foundation founded in 1936, Lilly Endowment Foundation 37, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation 1936, W.E. Kellogg Foundation 1930, and now some recent foundations including Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, Hewlett Foundation, J. Paul Getty Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropy, etc., etc. And perhaps all these philanthropies started out of remorse. Because when you are making money at industrial scale, you cannot be fair. You have to be exploitative in nature. And who were exploited? And the entire history of America is based on that, which started since 1492. But when these philanthropies started these foundations started philanthropy, there was another kind of colonization in the approach. This entire development managed by philanthropy was perceived by them that this is what is good for the countries and communities henceforth exploited by them. So that's why now we ought to do these kind of activities for their betterment. Again, someone else who created the problems also decided that this is going to be the solutions for the communities, for those who were exploited. And this kind of knowledge colonization, this kind of development colonization was perpetuated even by the philanthropic organizations even afterwards. I will come back to this question of decolonization and localization, but let me just divert for the time being. I was shared a few questions by Ruth and Lily in advance, which was posed by some of those who are participating today. And I found one question very, very interesting. So let me spend some time on that. And this question is how the Vedic philosophy views humanitarian aid. And perhaps most of you do not even may not know what Vedic philosophy is. Uh, Let me spend some time on that because this is very relevant to the problems we are facing as of now. Vedic philosophy is one of the ancient schools of thought from India. And there are six schools of thoughts in India, six theist schools of thought in India. The first one is Nyaya in Sanskrit, which means logic or epistemology. Vaisheshika, which means metaphysics. Sankhya, which deals with duality. Yoga, and everyone knows what yoga is. Ved, and we have four ancient scriptures codified as Vedas. They are very, very philosophical. And sixth is post-Vedic philosophy, which is known as Upanishad in Sanskrit. And these Upanishads have influenced numerous Indologists and Western philosophers. Most prominent of them are, if you must have watched Oppenheimer. And in this film, Oppenheimer says he is reading Upanishad, and he gets inspiration from one of the Upanishads, Max Muller and T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, who famously said that the Indian philosophers make most of the great European philosophers look like schoolboys. I'm not boasting our philosophy, but this is what I'm just quoting T.S. Eliot. And then there are three atheist schools of thought, including Charvak, Buddhism, and Jainism. I can't go into details of all of them, but I will very briefly like to touch the Sankhya philosophy. And Sankhya actually means number, and it talks about duality of two, which is consciousness or soul, that is one, and second is nature or matter. These two. Uh, this duality doesn't talk about God for creating universe. Rather, this is the consciousness and matter or nature. When they interact, the universe starts creation. Um, the French philosopher René Descartes has come very close to it because he also talked about duality of mind and body. But this Sankhya philosophy is much richer. It talks about that interaction between consciousness or soul and matter or universe. When these two interact, then creation starts. How? The first comes intellect, and then comes after the intellect comes ego. Ego means individuality, and then we start separating ourselves from nature, because now I'm an individual. I'm not part of the larger universe, but rather I have individuality, which starts leading to the problem. And then comes mind. It is much more complex and wider. I don't have time to get into that, and perhaps you will not be interested also in that. But uh, these three lead to creation of the universe. But there is one more element. Um, the nature or the matter has three qualities. And these three qualities, the first one is balance or light. The second one is action or passion. And third one is inertia or darkness. Sigmund Freud has come very close to this by talking about id, ego, and superego. Now, the Sankhya philosophy says that when these three qualities are in equilibrium, the nature is perfect, the universe is perfect. But when there is imbalance, particularly when the passion and darkness, inertia, they start dominating, then the disruption starts, and that leads to disasters. And the Sankhya philosophy categorizes disasters into three categories. Number one, environmental or natural disasters. Second, human-induced disasters. And third, internal or physical vulnerability. Now, if you see that while Sankhya philosophy talks about the equilibrium in these three qualities, and because of the lack of balance in that, the disruption starts, the natural disaster starts. This is what we can see. And if I just remain confined to the American history, this disruption started since 1492, because that was the year when Columbus discovered so-called new land, reached here. And what did he do when he reached here? He did not respect the local indigenous population. He looked down upon them. And this decolonial author, Minolo, suggests that when these settler colonizers first arrived, they first debated among themselves whether these aboriginals are human beings or not. Then they ended up with the conclusion that they are human beings, but not at par with them. Hence, it was their responsibility to civilize them. And then the civilization process started since 1492. Uh, Perhaps you're also aware, you might have been taught about this. After 1492, um, which was actually colonial project, but that was camouflaged as civilizational project. And then the infamous Berlin Conference of which was held in 1884. And in this Berlin Conference, there were 14 countries, all Europeans plus US, which decided the future of Africa. Uh, uh, because and this conference was also held in the name of humanitarianism, and they divided Africa among themselves, and then thereby the loot and colonization of the of Africa started. And then comes um, uh, this uh, the two phases in Europe: first Renaissance and Enlightenment. And during the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution started. And when the Industrial Revolution started, then that required the colonization at massive scale. And then East India companies were created in almost all the European countries which were looking for expansion and plundering of raw resources from southern countries. And if you might have read this poem of Rudyard Kipling, The White Man's Burden. All this plunder and loot was to camouflage the guilt. It was taken as civilizational responsibility. So he wrote White Man's Burden, that it is our responsibility as white people to civilize this unfortunate barbaric world. And this poem was authored for Roosevelt to inspire him to purchase Philippines from Spain, which is what eventually done. Uh, and this is how uh, why I am just touching these some historical events is because as there is a very brilliant author with journalist with the New Humanitarian, Patrick Gattara. He argues that you cannot solve today's problems and future problem if you don't understand the historical past. And this is our historical past, that in the name of humanitarianism, in the name of civilization, in the name of development, massive colonization and plundering happened, which continues in different form even now. Now, let me come how it is continuing now. what was happening through active colonization before Second World War started happening differently after the Second World War. And then some mandated institutions were created. For example, IMF, World Bank, United Nations were created to come up with prescriptive solutions for the development of the countries which have recently acquired independence, decolonized countries. So now a different kind of colonization started through prescriptive development. If you see, uh, now the World Bank defines that if you earn less than $3 per day, then you are poor. It is monetization of poverty. Earlier, most of the countries, they did not have this kind of monetized functioning, but now, in order to fit in the definition of being developed, as World Bank has defined, one ought to earn at least $3 per day to be qualified as development. Otherwise, uh, 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 one is poor, underdeveloped, and hence the responsibility of the developed world to develop these people. Um, now, let me quickly come to this problem of localization and the way forward before we get into some questions and answers. Uh, as I discussed earlier, that this entire debate on localization started since 2016, when the World Humanitarian Summit was held, and the World Humanitarian Summit was held because, again, it was the problem of funding. There were more problems than the funding available, then which led to the organization of World Humanitarian Summit on the initiative of the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. One of the key commitments made during this World Human Summit was to pass on at least 25% of funding, global funding, to local and national actors as directly as possible. So according to me, the problem is the entire mechanism is very, very transactional. You pass on funding, and then it is good localization. If you don't pass on funding enough, then it is not good localization, and that's why it has not happened. Even now, this funding is 3-4%, something like that. It has not. It has not happened to the desired scale 10 years after the grand bargain. The second problem of the localization is that it works through the binary of those who have problems and those who have solutions. This entire humanitarian sector overlooks the fundamental aspect that those who have problems also have the best solutions. But our entire epistemology, our entire aid architecture is not based on that premise. It is based on the premise that we have solutions for the problems which someone else has. Then the next problem is extreme commodification and monetization of humanitarian sector. Most of these countries where the aid is made in Asia, Africa, Latin America, they are very old civilizations. Disasters and tragedies are not new to these countries, but there was mechanism to manage the crisis through first response mechanism by being supportive to each other. But now there is a massive commodification of the aid sector to the extent uh, when the World Humanitarian Summit was convened, that time the annual mobilization of humanitarian aid was $19 billion or something. My apologies. The requirement was $19 billion or something. Against that, $10 billion were mobilized. So there was shortfall of nine to $10 billion between the needs and requirements, and that led to World Humanitarian Summit. Now, if you see the recent data, this funding has surpassed more than $50 billion. And still, the humanitarian sector talks about shortage of funding. And that means the problem is not in the mobilization of funding, but the way we are managing these funding. I have argued in my paper that the humanitarian system has been made so expensive that we need problems to sustain ourselves. So all the humanitarian agencies love if a Ukraine happens, because when money was flowing in Ukraine, billions and billions of dollars were mobilized within a very short span of time. So the humanitarian, because the system is so expensive, World Food Program, which is the richest UN agencies. Now, if there is no problem, how will they seek the funding to sustain their expensive structure? And that's why our sector is not solution centric, it is seeking problems. If there are problems, we have a reason to go out and ask for money. Another uh, problem, according to what I identify in this sector, uh, as the name itself manifest, it is called humanitarian sector. And that means the humanitarian sector will focus on human beings. And if I go back to our Sankhya philosophy, we are just one small part of the universe. But the Industrial Revolution uh, created this ontological division between human beings and non-human beings. And nature became natural resource. And when nature became natural resource, ancient societies lived in harmony with nature. But when nature became natural resource, then it is for the exploitation and well-being for human beings. And that's how we harm the equilibrium and create disasters. And when there is a disaster, who do we cater the most? Humanitarian sector, human beings. We don't try to fix the system, which is what Professor Hugo Slim says, that we are not saving systems, we are doing micro saving. We are targeting people instead of trying to save system which can save people. We are not fixing environment. We are oblivious to that. We are just targeting people. We are just targeting money, but we are not getting into root causes of problem. Now, when this is the problem at the global level, I see some problems or a massive problem at the level of local and national organizations as well. There is a very prominent decolonization thinker, Franz Fanon, who said, let me go back again to this decolonial author Quijano and Minolo, and both argue that then when the European settler colonizers reached the new land, they first created racial divisions. Because when you create division based on race, then you can very easily come up with a hierarchy. And of course, those who are coming up with this racial division will put themselves at top and others at the bottom. And the top becomes responsible for the betterment, well-being, development, and civilization of those who are lower in the hierarchy. And this is how racial profiling started. Over a period of time, those who were put at the bottom of the hierarchy, they also accepted that I am lower than someone who is superior to us. And this is now very deeply entrenched in the mindset of local and national organizations and people working with them. As French Fanon says, that they are continuously trying to, according to his words, trying to get whiter, because white is a good color. White is a color of civilization. White symbolizes civilization. White symbolizes development. White symbolizes modernity. So it's despite my black or brown color, there is a constant struggle to get whiter. Not in terms of course, in appearance, we not, but in terms of thinking, in terms of attitude, in terms of behavior. So a lot of local and national organizations are just becoming colonial outposts or mirror image of the global organizations. Another major problem of what I see in this sector, uh, see, when industrial revolution started in Europe, they needed colonies. They needed colonies to get raw material, which went to European countries, got processed, and came back to the colonized world. And this is how massive profit was made. Now that era of colonization has gone, it is over. But how it is continuing now? Because the new humanitarianism started in Europe, started in North Atlantic world, uh, I can see a new kind of East India companies emerging there, which is international NGOs, multilateral organizations. Funding is not growing in that part of the world now. So now again, they need fresh territories to raise funds because they're expensive. They have to maintain salary scale. They have to maintain operational expenses. So they need fresh territories of to raise revenue. And where are they finding these fresh territories? Again, they are coming back to their former colonies. And India is one of the favorite countries. You take um, at its peak, the Great Britain colonized maximum part of the world. Perhaps close to 68-69% of world was colonized by the Great Britain. It defeated all other European powers to control maximum part of the world. Now, if you see, I can see something very surprisingly that most of the NGOs which originated in UK also have their country offices in India and other southern countries, which are growing faster than quite a few European countries. It's a new pattern of colonization. Now, even in my country, as Ruth was telling during my introduction, that I'm founder of an Indian organization. But for me, despite being an Indian, despite being in India, I have plenty of problems in raising domestic resources. The resources which are very much Indian. Who is raising these resources? These resources are raised by new East India companies, which are these international NGOs now registered in India by with the suffix of India. And they claim, yes, our board is Indian, our staff is Indian, we are very Indian. But according to me, they are East India companies because the policies come from outside, the entire work culture come from outside, and the definition of development in humanism also comes from outside. This is the new phase of colonization. So we are marginalized as we were marginalized within our context during colonial era. We continue being marginalized even now in post-colonial era when we continue talking about localization and decolonization. The problem with the decolonization discourse is that it is primarily dominated by those who control the colonial matrix of power. And that's why there is no headway we are making on this. Next problem I would like to talk about is epistemology. Uh, all these people uh, in after 1945, after the Second World War, when the new institutions were created, World Bank, IMF, UN agencies, they came up with their own development of poverty. So all of a sudden, a large part of the world became poor because they did not fit in the definition of these global institutions, how they defined poverty, how they defined development. So they were not underdeveloped until yesterday, but now they were. So now they have to be developed. So there was a prescription, there's a definition of development, and this how you need to change yourself. So all the age-old societies, they are being taught to stop living the way they had been living for generations and start living the way some other communities have been living. So changing ourselves according to others is development, and that's the problem. And that comes the entire epistemology, because most of the universities, most of the education institutions, they do not talk about pluriversality. These are called universities because they are talking about universal knowledge, which is universal, but knowledge is very, very pluriversal. These epistemology is teaching that knowledge production, as during colonial time, raw material came from colonized world, it was processed in the by the colonial powers. The same way, the knowledge is being treated. Some countries, some institutions are producing knowledge, and rest are consuming knowledge, and that's a massive problem according to me in this entire discourse on uh, localization and decolonization. um, I've talked enough about the problems. and soon my time will be over. So let me quickly move to talking about some solutions and way forwards, and then we can get into some questions and answer. So the solutions I prescribe is uh, we should move from a universal approach to pluriversal approach. Every community is very unique. Uh, but now in this modern era of development in humanism, we have stopped celebrating the pluriversality and diversity of different communities, and we expect everyone to live according to the Western value system. The humanitarian sector is also this. It works through common template that if and that's why international interagency standing committee IAC has their definite separate distinguished cluster mechanism. So this global template has to be applied in all the contexts. It overlooks the pluriversality and different kind of knowledge production system and different kind of community mechanisms to deal with the problem. So we have to start celebrating pluriversality. Second, first, I talked about epistemic violence, and epistemic violence was when you, after getting educated in a European or American university, you go to a village and you meet with a village level worker. You think that I know what are your problems, and I also know how you can solve your problems, and I'm going to tell you how you should solve your problem. This is epistemic violence. I call make a call to local and national organizations to go with epistemic disobedience. Gandhiji, and everyone knows Gandhiji. Gandhiji started disobedience, civil disobedience against the colonizers. Um, I invite local and national organizations to go with epistemic disobedience. And that doesn't mean negating the knowledge being produced in a reputed university like Fordham. We get educated from Fordham also, but we also have other knowledge production system, and we have to equally acknowledge and learn from those knowledge production system, addressing the barrier in the knowledge production system. Third, what I call international organizations, if you want decolonization, then you stop assuming that it is your burden to develop the rest of the countries. People are responsible enough to take control of themselves. What we ought to do, we have to be just good human beings, good fellows with each other. Sometimes uh, Ruth might need my help to solve some problems. Sometimes I may require support from Ruth to solve my problems. It's not that only Ruth can solve my problem because she is based in the USA. This kind of fellowship is very much required in the humanitarian system. For that, East India Company should start withdrawing from the southern countries and just be a good fellow from wherever they are based. Another problem, what a solution I make uh, is that this humanitarian system has been made very, very expensive. One of the questions was, which was shared with me, uh, considering the current funding related challenges, is volunteering seen as part of the solution? Uh, Volunteerism had always been part of our countries. Every country, whether it's a US or India or DRC or Sudan, volunteerism always exists. If you see a fellow human being in trouble, if you see an accident on the road, you don't first go back to your office to write a project proposal and secure fund before helping this person. You just do whatever you can. This is how people react when they see someone in the in nearby in crisis. Uh, but what has happened, this professional humanitarianism, professional development has made it so expensive. Like David Miliband of the head of International Refugee Committee, and it is quite debatable. It was became a controversial issue when it was brought in the public that his salary is $10 million per annum. And so just imagine uh, $10 million salary of one head of one international organization. The other, so many international organizations, they have little less, but still it is quite huge. But when these uh, international organizations start working in southern countries, they don't respect local operational economy. They operate through their own economy, which immediately inflates the operational economy within the southern countries. So local and national organizations, which are resourceless already in this monetized functioning, they get further eroded. We should apply here this purchasing power parity principle here. If I buy an iPhone here in India by paying 100,000 rupees, I don't pay 100,000 rupees in the US to buy an iPhone. Perhaps I pay $100. But the same doesn't happen when it comes to humanitarian sector. These international organizations maintain the same salary structure even when they start operating in southern countries. And that is then what happens, there is a major erosion of intellectual capital with local and national organizations, because everyone aspires first the brand satisfaction of working with a reputed global organization, and the salaries and perks, social security. So there is a constant erosion of intellectual capital with local and national organizations within their context, because someone is paying a lot more, providing a lot more social security than their local organizations can ever dream to pay. So this operational economy is very, very important if we want a real localization through this decolonization. And the last point before I stop and get into some questions and answers, this the contemporary model of humanitarian aid is failing. It's the humanitarian agencies which are much more desperate for problems because they need money than the people themselves. Now, because of this fresh funding cut and closure of USAID, and then further deduction of funding from FCDO, Swiss, Germany, Belgium, etc. Tom Fletcher, the head of UNOCHA, came up with humanitarian reset. And through this humanitarian reset, he talked about hyper prioritization. So prioritize where the problems are more acute. And that is so much of injustice within the sector, because through this hyper prioritization, you are overlooking a large number of population which need some support but is not getting it. How to change that? We need to move from this monetized and commodified form of humanitarian aid to mutual aid. People are helping each other in their communities. It's a low cost, it's very prompt. As a good neighbor, as a good fellow, we have to just watch and offer our helping support. And I can give one example from the US or other European countries. I have lived in Europe and I've seen that their living is so monetized that whatever you do, you need to incur money. So sometimes people, because it's very expensive, people take help from their friends and relatives to get a few things done. For example, if you're moving from one house to another, you just call your friends and relatives. Just please help me to move. And that saves money. There's mutual aid. And this is how all these traditional communities have been functioning, which is very low cost. And as a good neighbor, we have to just extend our helping hand so that they can continue helping each other in a better way. And this will bring down the operational economy to the lowest scale. We can cover a lot more people. And that when Ruth approached me, she asked me that, can you speak on localization? I said, no, I would rather like to call about relocalization, because before this global system started, the communities were taking care of themselves, sometimes efficiently, sometimes not so efficiently, if the problems were bigger than the resources they had. Uh, the international system assumed the responsibility of taking care of everyone. And now they say that we localize, we pass on more resources to local and national organizations. So instead of localization, let's focus on relocalization. Respect the communities agencies that if they have problems, they also have solutions. They may not have resources in the desired scale, and where as a good fellow, good companion, we can offer resources, but without being patronizing, without being controlling, without being prescriptive, and telling them what they must do to solve their problems. With that, I stop and let's get into some discussions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. And this was very, 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 very informative. Myself, I've learned so much. Now is the time for Q&A. So participants, if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. As of now, I don't see any questions. Do you have any questions? Any thoughts, comments? Please enter them in the Q&A, and then I'll be able to relay them. But one of the a few things or several points you made, Mr. Singh, stood out for me. This whole idea. One, of course, I think when you were talking about the problems and the challenges, you talked a lot about the how transactional the aid system is. And then also how it's really built around commodification and monetization of humanitarian aid, and then how the system has become extremely expensive, and in many ways because it's not solutions eccentric, but rather problem eccentric. And I think this year, if I remember off the top of my head, 33 billion is required. I have to double check that number to respond to humanitarian needs across the world. And these are not all of the humanitarian needs. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about it is true the humanitarian needs have grown exponentially and they continue to grow. But maybe you could talk about some of the things from your perspective as you've been thinking about this that could make it less expensive.
How can we make it less expensive?
Yes.
Uh, uh, and that's actually not very difficult to suggest. This decolonial author, I'm quite impressed with Manolo, Escobar, etc. They have argued that modernity and coloniality are two sides of the same coin. What is modernity? Modernity is not the way an indigenous community lives. Modernity is the way uh, European and American communities live. That is modernity. And since that modernity is presented as an ideal form of living to the rest of the world, all of us are trying to live according to that. And that is leading to monetized way of living. Now earlier our societies had a lot of circular economy practices. That is gone. In the modernity, circular economy doesn't work. So we create a lot of garbage. Uh, since the communities live with the nature, I just give one very simple example. In the villages in India, and I believe it must be happening in so many villages of so many other countries also, to clean your teeth, you did not need toothbrush and toothpaste. You just take a twig of a tree, neem tree or any other tree, and that's very healthy for the teeth, and you just brush your. Now this modern humanitarianism, what do they do? If I'm a humanitarian organization, if I have to respond to humanitarian crisis in a village or in a set of village, then I come up with a package of food and non-food items. And in the non-food items package, I will put toothpaste, toothbrushes, and all of that. All these things which are actually not required by the people because they traditionally they don't use it. But through this new form of humanitarianism, we are teaching them, see, that was this, you need to discard your practice because this is the modernity. Modernity is to clean your teeth through toothbrush, toothpaste. And now it is So you often you give cash system, food assistance. When you plan for food, there was a word food program once. Now they have given up, I believe. Once when World Food Program planned for food distribution, they always planned for fortified food. And when you are planning to distribute fortified food, then you don't procure food from the local market. You import it from elsewhere, which is very costly. And this is how the operational economy gets inflated everywhere. So when we as outsiders don't plan humanitarianism, then the cost significantly goes down. If you just allow people to plan for themselves, then cost significantly goes down. They will plan only the things which they require. And second, operational economy is, if I just take example of Cox's Bazar Rohingya problem from Bangladesh. If you see, Bangladesh has very good movement of local NGOs. They are very, very competent. But now Cox's Bazar, where you have 1 million plus Rohingya refugees, it has become a den of expatriates. And when I say expatriates, it's not people coming from Pakistan and India. It is people who are coming from Europe and America with very high salaries. And then when they're coming with these very high salaries and a lot of perks because they are working supposedly in a difficult context, this money is also taken out from the humanitarian funding. If you just don't deploy all these expatriates, which are not required because you have good, very competent local humanitarian workers, the operation economy goes down. And this is why I constantly argue that it is not the problem of funding, it is the problem in the way we utilize funding. And unless we check that, the funding will continue being a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Singh. And here's one question from a participant, which is how can the humanitarian system in advancing localization intentionally build the capacity and sustainability of emerging local organizations? I think here the point the participant is making is that often funding is given to extensive, existing organizations with extensive experience and an established track record. And so a new local organization with no track record, which is just really starting up and building, how can the humanitarian system help support those kinds of organizations, new actors, basically?
And this is a very, very interesting question. Thank you very much. And I love to talk about this entire discussion on capacity building, because according to me, this entire discussion on capacity building is actually perpetuating colonization. When the British were ruling us, they came up with a system of civil servants, uh, the administrative class. And these civil servants were trained not to serve Indians better, but to serve colonial masters better by ruling strictly the colonized people. Now, when we talk about capacity building, the capacity building is primarily to serve donors better than to the communities better. So most of the capacity building programs are organized in order to train us how to write a good project proposal, how to work through log frame, how to manage cash programming. Do these capacity building programs save lives? They don't. They help us to get better to secure funding from international actors. And that's why uh, there is so much of coloniality in our sector, because those who are controlling resources, they want to listen in the language which is understood easily by them. And who speaks the same jargon? Who can write a very impressive project proposal if there is a call from FCDO or from Dutch government or from the German government? Who can write a this project proposal better? Who can qualify their due diligence better? It's not a small local organization. It's a international NGO. And this is how the system is perpetuating the coloniality in this system. We talk about localization, but we expect local organizations to come up to our level instead of us getting accustomed to the level of local organizations, understanding where they are good at, and where they are not so good at. They have to be very good to deal with the communities, to address the problems of the communities, not to write a fantastic project proposal in English. They can't. So if they can't, that should not go against them. So the system needs this kind of fine tuning, but the system is not ready yet to amend that way. So what I argue that stop talking about capacity building, because that capacity building is perpetuating coloniality. Start talking about skill building. If my skill is built, then I can work better with my communities. If my capacity is built, it will enrich my resume, and then I'll apply for my next job with an international NGO, and I'll move out from the community to a capital city. So this is how international organizations, bilateral donors have to start thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. This has been really, really thought-provoking. And again, Mr. Sudhanshu S. Singh is the CEO and founder of Humanitarian Aid International. And honestly, this is very thought-provoking. I'm sure a lot of the questions you're asking, some of them we've thought about. Some of them are going to leave us, thinking a lot more. And hopefully we can take some of this knowledge as we continue to practice humanitarian work. But again, thank you so much. I hope you'll be able to join us again some other time.